Hello and welcome to today's video on what not to do in your cover letter. Even though we're going to focus on a cover letter that you submit with your manuscript when you're sending it to a scientific journal, the stuff that we're going to talk about here in this video, the way that we're going to talk about writing a letter, appealing to an editor or another person is going to help you in any of the cover letters you're writing, any of the emails you're going to be writing to professors and things like that. So hi, I'm Casey Butler. This is Butler SciComm. Welcome to my channel, and let's learn what not to do in a cover letter. One of the biggest mistakes I see in so much writing across the sciences, whether it's in your cover letter or in a grant or even in a paper, is just this persistent notion that your results or your grades or your CV or whatever it is going to speak for itself. And unfortunately, as nice as it would be if that were true, it just isn't. Your results are never actually going to speak for themselves. Your CV is never going to speak for itself. It is your job to speak for your results, to speak to your CV, to put yourself out there, to put your science, your information out there in a way that other people are interested in and want to read or look at or pay attention to. And so that's kind of what we're going to cover here today in this video on what not to do in a cover letter. We're going to talk about how to not put it in such a way that the burden is on your reader to figure out the key points or the highlights or what they need to know to judge if your manuscript is worthy or not of publication in their journal. And one of the ways that we're going to explore this is go through a series of emails. And so looking at these emails, we're going to discuss what is in these emails, what kind of stuff composes them, and why they may or may not be effective. And so I'm going to put these emails for you up on the screen one at a time. If you're having a hard time reading them, you can always go to the post associated with this video. So for the first email A starts with, "Dear friend, I am a Nigerian prince and I need your help. If you do not immediately send money to this bank account, I cannot rescue my daughter, the princess, from prison camp. In exchange for your assistance, once she is free, you will be given a share of our fortune. Thank you, friend, Nigerian prince." Okay, so email A, this email was thrown in here to see who is paying attention. Obviously, hopefully, you're not going to send a Nigerian prince email along with your cover letter when you are submitting to a journal. We all know, or we hope we know, that these types of emails don't work, but it's worth throwing in here anyway so that you can see the contrast, okay? This email we obviously know is fake. This is a blast email that goes out to tons of people, and this is something that we definitely want to avoid doing. Under no circumstances should the cover letter that you send out with your paper seem like it is a blast email that went out to tons of different people and you're just hoping somebody clicks on it. Okay, let's avoid spamming editors with our cover letters and focus on something that is very much more in tune to what the journal is looking for and something that is written specifically for the editors of that journal. So now let's move on to email B. I'm going to put email B up on the screen here for you and let you take a look at it. So this email is written in a very general fashion. That's fine. Just pretend that these are real things that are written in here and just go with the flow of this email and see the information that is given in this email. So this email starts, "Dear Professor, I am a student from some university interested in attending your university for graduate school. Your university is a really great fit for me because I want to be able to do the type of science that you do, and it has been my lifelong dream to attend this university. I have worked very hard in undergraduate, achieving nearly perfect GPA and GRE scores, as well as taking other classes that are highly relevant for graduate work but were not required. I was wondering if there were any available positions in your laboratory and if I can mention your name on my application. Best, undergraduate student." Okay, so before we discuss what's going on in email B, I want to move on and read you email C. Okay, so email C is up on the screen. Here's what email C says. "Dear Professor Casey, I am very excited about your research program, especially your studies on X, and your most recent paper published on this topic in this journal is a great example of how this could be applied to Y. It is interesting that you saw this result, as I would have expected more of this other type of mechanism. I have been looking into applying to your university for graduate studies and wondered if you would be open to discussing any possible research opportunities. I would be very interested in further exploring the topic presented in your most recent paper, as well as your work on Z, which would support my overall goal of achieving these things. Best wishes, undergraduate student. So what do you think about the differences between email B and email C? Hopefully now, seeing them back to back, you can see what the differences are. You can see how one would be a little bit more attractive than the other to a professor. Hopefully you see which one. So looking back at email B then, what's going on here? Can you spot what the major difference is? If you were a professor, which one of these emails would you be most likely to respond to? B or C? The answer here is probably email C. Email B is not a terrible email. You're giving the information to the professor. You are asking if, you could be interested in their lab, but it's still actually not very personal. This email is about you. It is centered on your grades, on what you want. And nowhere in this email are you trying to help the professor see how what you have could help maybe what that professor wants. And this is where the big difference here is and where the big disconnect is between emails B and C. Email B is expecting the results to speak for themselves, or basically your CV. You are giving the professor information about your GPA, your GRE, the classes that you took, what your goals are, and expecting that to speak for itself. Whereas the difference here in email C is you are showing an interest in that professor, and you're still putting some of that information in there that you're applying to the university and things, but what you are doing is writing an email that is an appeal to that other person. And so in email C, you are actually putting those facts together and speaking for your CV instead of letting your CV speak for itself. Okay. In email B, there is actually no indication that this student knows all that much about the professor's lab. This student could be basically blasting this email out to several different professors at the university, hoping for a few responses. And the same thing happens with cover letters in your journal. If the cover letter that you are submitting with your paper is entirely focused on your paper, then it's not actually clear to the editor that you specifically want to be published in their journal versus just want to be published in literally any journal that will accept your work. And so what we want to do here is change that focus a bit. We want to make our cover letter look a little bit more like email C. Make it look personalized, make it something that hopefully is more interesting for the editor to read because it is not just focused on you. It is not just focused on listing facts about you and expecting the editor to put that all together. It's going to be something that already puts it together for the editor and presents them with that information instead. In that way, hopefully you can see also between email B and C, the difference then in how exciting that email probably is for the professor. It's not very exciting to read an email like email B that's all about somebody else. It's much more exciting to read an email like email C that is actually kind of about you. And so this is what we're going to try to do. This is what we're going to try to work on. And this is what comes from not just allowing the results to speak for themselves and actually going in and speaking for our results. And then just one last point here. Would you respond to email B or email C? Think about it. So with email B, you might actually respond. But if you were really busy, if you had something else going on, if you hadn't had a coffee yet recently, this is the type of email that could easily get read, put back in your inbox, and then you just forget about it later. Whereas email C is going to stand out more. It's going to stick out in your mind. You're going to remember it more, and you are going to be more likely to respond to it either immediately or think about it again later to respond to it later. So this is what we want also. We want to make something, write something that is going to stick in somebody's mind to make them more likely to want to respond to us. And so now when we go to directly apply this sort of analogy or this sort of theory to what we're going to do with our journal cover letters, we're going to hopefully immediately avoid the biggest mistake that I see in journal cover letters. That biggest mistake that I see is writing a cover letter that looks a whole lot like email B. And if you think you write a cover letter like this, you are not alone. When I say this is the biggest mistake I see, this is overwhelmingly the cover letters I see that are submitted with manuscripts to scientific journals. And these cover letters usually consist of almost nothing at all except details about the paper itself. Some of these cover letters go on for pages, trying to cram in as many results, as much information about what was done in this paper as absolutely possible. And that is really just exactly writing email B. That is putting tons of results out there, thinking that it's that one more result that is going to make the editor want to read more about your paper, want to consider sending your paper out for review. But unfortunately, it really does come across just like email B. When you write those really long cover letters that do nothing but talk about your paper and your results, you are making your results speak for themselves. You are making your editor go in and actually think about your results, analyze your results, try to figure out how they fit in, how it might fit into the journal, how interesting it would be to the readers of that journal. And that is putting a lot more work on your editor. And just like the difference between email B and email C, with a cover letter written like email B, yes, your editor might respond. And yes, you actually might get a favorable response here. Because this is overwhelmingly the type of cover letter I see, somebody has to be getting favorable responses to these cover letters. Think about the number of journal submissions that your editor is getting, and think about how they have to look at all of these cover letters and they have to do this work for every cover letter, synthesizing this information in their head, putting it together, figuring out how this research might fit into their journal. That is exhausting. And if your cover letter happens to come across their desk when they haven't refreshed their coffee recently, or when they've just accepted a couple other papers or sent a couple other papers out for review, so they're not so pressured to get another paper, the chances of you getting a favorable response here go down considerably. So what we want to do instead is make it much more difficult to get an unfavorable response and work on crafting our cover letter much more like email C. So unlike email B, things we're not going to want to include in our cover letter. First, we do not want to include an extensive listing of the results of our paper. If your editor is interested in reading your paper, they will read your paper. You do not need to list everything you did in your cover letter. Also, you do not need to reiterate the abstract and the introduction, and you actually shouldn't reiterate both of those in your paper. The third thing you don't want to do is list your past achievements. Just like you don't want to give a list of results, a list of your past achievements is the same sort of thing, hoping that your results or your CV will speak for themselves. Finally, you don't want to include more than a page of text body. Some of you probably gasped out loud when I told you this, but trust me, you can fit everything that you need in one page of a cover letter, and you're not going to overwhelm an editor when you send this to them. And then, just to prepare you for next week, what you do want to include in your cover letter is going to be first, that you know what journal you're applying to, that this is not a blast journal, and that you know the types of things that they publish. So we're going to shift from email B to email C by making this much more personalized, making it obvious that you know who you're applying to, that you are actually interested in that specific journal and not just any journal. We are going to have a brief, maximum one paragraph that gives a description of where the field stands, where the problems are that your work is addressing. You absolutely want to make sure that you point out what these problems are, what these gaps are, clearly in explicit terms, so the problem is absolutely definitely stated. You do want to describe some of your research, but no more than one paragraph max. Overview of the main results of the paper, especially as related to that problem that you brought up at the beginning. You do not need to list everything that you did in your paper. This is a brief overview. This is the main results. And then, after all of this, you're still going to have one whole entire paragraph in your cover letter that is going to discuss exactly why your content, what you wrote here, fits with this journal, and an explanation of why your research will be interesting to the readership of the journal. So if you want to learn a little bit more about what to definitely put in your cover letter, how to structure your cover letter, and exactly the type of information to include and where, stay tuned for the next video. We're going to post it in 2 weeks. If you want to be notified of when this video is posted, you can subscribe to my channel and you will get a notification. Otherwise, see you in 2 weeks in video 2 of exactly what to put in your cover letter.